Hello, everybody. We're here at the Warrior exhibit in Fayetteville, Tennessee, and I have Linda Williams with me. And Linda, tell us who we have today.
Don, today we have Mr. Billy Kelley. He is retired Air Force, and he served 26 years in the Air Force. So we're excited to hear from him today.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Billy Kelley. I was born in Greenville, Mississippi. My parents were sharecroppers on a cotton plantation, but shortly after I and my twin brother were born, we moved back to where all our family was from in South Alabama, north of Mobile. Lived on a little farm there till I finished high school, and finished high school on Friday night, and Monday morning I went in the Air Force, 17 years old. And the reason why was it was either we knew we was going to get drafted in 1964 because the Southeast Asia thing was spooling up, and my brother wanted to go to college, my twin brother, but I had no use for any kind of school. I just wanted to go because I was going to be plowing a mule if I didn't go. So I joined the Air Force, went to Lackland Air Force Base, Texas for basic training. May the 26th, 1964. Yeah. Come out of there. The day I got out of basic training was, a lot of people don't remember, but they had something called the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which started the Vietnam War. That's the day I got out of basic training. And my older brother was in the Air Force in Louisiana, and I flew to his house, flew to Shreveport, Louisiana to visit him. And he said, "Have you heard what happened?" And I said, "No." And he said they had an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, and a U.S. Navy ship was attacked. And that pretty much got everything going. From there, I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, and went to cook school. They made me a cook. And then from there, after a few months, I went to Gunner Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. Stayed there for a couple of years and went to Kenai, Alaska, a place called Wildwood Air Force Station. And it was kind of in the wild woods. Kenai, a lot of people know where that's at now, but at that time it was just a dirt road. But there was a radio relay base there between the Pentagon and the rest of the world, I guess. But that's the reason why the military was there. I stayed there a year and a half, and then I went to New Mexico, to Albuquerque, New Mexico, a place called Manzana Air Force Base. And nobody there in Albuquerque had ever heard of it because it was underground. And pretty much everything about it was inside of a mountain. And it was, nobody knew anything about it. And still don't, I guess, but I stayed there almost 4 years, and then I went to Thailand during the Vietnam War, and was assigned to a small unit there. And the biggest incident we had there was in 1971, I believe it was, or 1970. They had the Son-Tay raid. It was a raid that they went into North Vietnam to try to get our POWs out. And when they got there, they had moved them. And it just ended up in a firefight, and some people got hurt, but we didn't get any prisoners out of there. And I wasn't part of it, but I was at the base in Thailand where they launched. They stayed with us 3 or 4 days before they launched over the border. And I remember them coming back. And there was a guy named Bull Simons that was a commander. He was an Army colonel, and they were all very upset because they had had a leak of somehow or another. The North Vietnamese had got word, and they had moved the prisoners. So there was nobody there. And of course, these people were really disappointed. Bull Simons, later on, you might remember him, but he did a raid in Iraq many years later to try to get some civilians out of there. He was a warrior, and he ended up being a hog farmer down in the peninsula in Florida, right outside of Pensacola somewhere. Now that's what he retired to. He was a heck of a guy to meet. I only met him for 3 days, but he was a heck of a guy to have met in my career. From there, I left Thailand, and I'm trying to think where I went to Biloxi, Mississippi. And then while I was at Biloxi, I retrained and became a loadmaster on a C-130 airplane, and went to school for about a year, and ended up in New Jersey. And I was on 141s for 2 years. I didn't like New Jersey, so I put in a statement to go worldwide, volunteer. And about 2 years later, less than 2 years, I had an assignment to Yokota, Japan, Tokyo. And I retrained, and I had to retrain. I went into C-130 airplanes, and I stayed on them for 13 years.
Now, what were you doing?
I was a loadmaster.
Okay.
Yeah. When you see stuff falling out the back of airplanes, that was the loadmaster back there. He's in charge of all that. And I had 8,000 hours on a C-130, and went to all over the world. Literally went probably 40-something countries I either lived or worked in or something, you know. And then that was that launched me into my career once I retired. I retired in June of 1990. And at that time, the commercial aviation was just realizing that we can fly cargo instead of putting it on ships. And then they realized we can take a 747, which is big as a warehouse, and put cargo on it and do it a lot faster than the ships can do it. So I got into those programs, and I worked for 2 or 3 different companies. I worked for Lockheed in Saudi Arabia, and then I went to Africa and did airdrops for the United Nations. We were dropping food in Sudan. And we did food drops there, and I saw things there I never saw before in my life. And I was a civilian, but it was mind-boggling what I got to see there, because I saw people starving to death by the hundreds. And what it amounted to was Sudan is basically a Muslim country, but there's a Christian element there, and they were trying to kill all of the Christians, and so they would burn their fields and kill all of their goats. And the United Nations got into it because of a basketball player by the name of Manute Bol, who used to play basketball for the Houston Rockets. He was from there. He was about 7 feet something tall, but he organized a relief effort, and the United Nations and the U.S. government got involved in it. And that's how I ended up. I was working for a company that we just went around the world, whatever they sent us to do, you know. And so we ended up dropping food there. And on some days when it was dry, it wasn't too wet, we could land in the dirt, because we were using C-130s, short field. And we could land in the dirt, and you would really get to see people suffering like you never saw before in your life. Little kids, we would have 40 tons of grain or whatever on the airplane, and they would come on to offload it by hand in these big bags, and invariably some of those bags would get broken up and the grain would spill out. And I saw adults and little 4-year-old kids on their hands and knees picking up one grain at a time. And that's when I realized that we in America, we're not in quite the crisis that we think we are every day, you know, because I've seen people starving to death, and they were all about this big around. Never saw anything like that before or after. But I worked some contracts in Africa, went into Mogadishu. That was a strange place to go to, because we never landed there when you didn't hear small arms fire. It never got close to us, but you could hear it going on around the airport. And then after that, I left and I went to calmer places around the world. And I used to get on a cargo airplane in JFK, And I would go around the world. I'd go out on Monday afternoon, and I'd be back on Friday. And we would make, I think it was, one of them was 14 stops, and one of them was 18 stops. And we would just download, upload, download, upload, and you would go through Africa and Germany and Greece and all the way down through the Middle East and on into Russia, and then back through Chicago and then New York. It was quite a ride. But I did that for a short while, then I ended up in Bogota, Colombia. And all of this was because the Air Force made me a loadmaster years before, you know. But I ran a cargo station in Bogota. And believe it or not, we hauled 1 million flowers a night from Bogota to Miami. That was the contract we had. Cut flowers that you buy at Walmart or wherever. We did that every night. And it was an interesting job. I enjoyed living in Colombia, I really did. Bogota is like 8,000 feet up. So the weather there is almost perfect year round. There's no snow, no ice, but there's no really hot weather. You know, they don't even have heat or air conditioning in any of the buildings. So I liked it there, I really did. And then from there, my home is Alabama originally, and I would come home to check on my parents. And I came through Miami where my bosses were, and I heard them talking about a contract that we were going to get in Huntsville, Alabama. And so I said, well, look, guys, I'm going on break for a couple of weeks, but if y'all need any help there, let me know, because I'm going to be in Alabama. Well, they called me the next day. Said, how about going up there? We're going to work a few airplanes. So I went and stayed 18 years. And I went, and they said, oh, it's just going to be 4 or 5 airplanes. And then they told me, well, stay there. It's going to be 4 or 5 more. Then they said, well, get you a hotel room for a while. So I did that, and then about 3 months later, they said, go find you a place to live, because you're going to be the manager, and we got a permanent contract there. So all of that because I became a loadmaster in the Air Force. It was for a guy who was plowing a mule, 17 years old and hated school, it was the doggonest life that you have ever seen, you know. It was, I just got to see a lot of things, and I didn't take 1 million pictures because I took them in my mind, you know. And but I've been from New Zealand to Argentina to way on up in Norway. The world is very small, actually, because I used to go through Iceland, Keflavik, Iceland. We had cargo. It went to Keflavik, into England, into Germany, from New Jersey. Well, there was a girl I went to high school with, teaching school at Keflavik. So I looked her up, and every time I'd go through there, I'd meet her at base ops, and we'd get a hamburger or something or other, because we didn't spend the night there. We would just be there for 2 or 3 hours. And then I went through, it was late spring, and she said, well, I probably won't see you the next trip you come through. And I said, what's going on? She said, I'm changing assignments. I'm going to Japan. And I said, okay, you know, well, I'll look you up one of these days or something, or maybe we'll get together. And when I got back to New Jersey, I had a set of orders sending me to Japan. So this girl, she came home for the summer in her parents in South Alabama and stayed with them. And I went to Arkansas for about 4 months of school. And I came home and I looked her up, and she said, well, I've been delayed because I had an appendectomy. And so I had to get that done before I went to Japan. And they've changed my assignment. And I said, well, where are you going? And she said, to Yokota Air Base, because originally she was going to Kadena, which is several hundred miles away. I said, well, I'll surprise you. I got orders to Yokota Air Base also. So she left, and a few weeks later, I went to Japan. And when you go to these places, you go in, and the military takes care of each other. They really do. And so when I landed there, my sponsor met me at the airport, took me to the NCO club to get a beer. It was about 9 o'clock at night. I walked in there, I sit down, and this guy goes, I'm leaving in the morning. I've got a car in the parking lot I'm selling for $75. Anybody want to buy it? I said, I do. I just got here. So I bought the car, you know. And that's the way they exchange things. So I bought the car, and I had to learn to drive on the other side of the road and all of that. So the next morning I got out there, and I'm training myself, and I'm riding around. And I said, you know, that girl Pam, she's around here somewhere, but I don't know where she is. I'm going to try to find her. So about 3 o'clock, I found the elementary school. And I went in and I said, maybe I'm lost, but I'm looking for a lady named Pam Smith. I gave them her name. And I think she teaches school here somewhere in the elementary school. And they said, yeah, she's right down the hall. She'll be out in 5 minutes. So she came out and we got reacquainted again, hadn't seen her in a while. And I said, well, where do you live? And she said, well, I can't tell you, but I can show you. But I ride the shuttle bus back and forth to work. I hadn't bought a car yet. And I said, well, I got one on you. I bought a car last night within 5 minutes of getting here. She said, you're kidding. I said, no, I've got a car. And I said, if you know how to get to where you live, I'll take you to where you live, because it's a big base. So anyway, I did. I took her to where she lived. And we got over there to her apartment. It was just a big apartment complex. And we're sitting there talking. And eventually she said, by the way, where do you live? And I said, right there. A girl from my hometown lived about 150 feet from me. I'm serious. That's a true story.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And all that came by just by being in the Air Force, you know.
So you would say to kids today, it's a good thing to do.
Absolutely. If you don't have a real plan, like my twin brother wanted to go to college, I understand that. I did not. Didn't have any plans. I just wanted out of high school, you know. Mm-hmm. And I wanted away from that mule that I did not want to plow.
Okay, let's go back to Albuquerque. I want to hear about this base in the mountain.
It's called Manzana. It's still there. I don't think it's being used for anything.
But I mean, when you were stationed there, did you live in Albuquerque? Or
yes, well, I lived on this base out on the side of this mountain.
On the side of
but everything was inside of the mountain that made a difference. But I was on the, we had a barracks. You know, all of us single guys lived in a barracks out there. It was very small. It was just a few hundred people there, a couple of hundred people. You know, and you could see, I could see Albuquerque. We were at pretty high altitude. I forget, 4,000 or 5,000 feet up, I guess. But you could see Albuquerque down below us. You know, it's about 10 miles away.
My sister and her husband was stationed at Sandia Base.
I drove right across Sandia Base to get to Manzana Base.
Okay.
Yeah, and they know where Manzana is.
Sure.
I know that. Are they still there?
No.
Yeah. It was a great assignment. I loved it out there. But, you know, I'm from the South, and
Yeah.
I never did go back except to visit. But, you know, I could have stayed there, but I'm just a Southern boy. You know, eventually I came home.
Southern boy that's traveled the world multiple times.
I did that, yeah.
Awesome.
I did that, yeah.
Yeah.
And my mother used to laugh because I was a bachelor all of these years until a few years ago I got married. And but I used to come home and she'd say, when are you leaving? I said, I don't know, I'm waiting on a phone call. And she said, well, it's the darndest thing because you get a phone call and you can be gone in 10 minutes. I said, I've been packing like that for years. So yeah, I could go in and 10 minutes later walk out with my bags and leave for 6 months, you know. And yeah,
Really?
yeah. It was
All because of the Air Force.
it was quite interesting. Went to some strange places. Went to a place called Fornebu, Norway one time. And it was snow up to here. And I don't know, we took something up there from Germany. And they said, you have a colonel and his wife is going back to Germany with you. And I said, okay, you know. So they came out and I met this colonel and they came on board and we all got squared away and ready to go. And they're sitting next to me and I'm sitting here in those old military jump seats. And I heard her talking and she had a real Southern accent. And so I had to do a little safety briefing on the microphone, and I did it. And then I sat down and we took off. And she said, young man, where are you from? And I said, Thomasville, Alabama. She said, you know where Grove Hill, Alabama is? I said, 6 miles away. I sure do. She said, well, that's where I spent my summers. All my cousins lived there, and I knew all of her cousins. And I'm thinking, I'm in Fornebu, Norway. And I run into someone who was raised up in Tuscaloosa and Grove Hill, Alabama. That's amazing. To me, it's a small world, you know. just like the school teacher that I knew.
Yeah.
You know, we lived 150 feet from each other. Yeah, it was incredible. But I went to strange places. Somalia was a dangerous place, very dangerous place. Tehran, Iran, was a very dangerous place. Uh,
You ever go
but
to Israel?
I went to Israel. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I think, you know, sure do. People there were really nice. I was military at that time, and people there were really nice to us. One of the strangest missions I ever had, we had a regular cargo run, ran from Germany all the way to Tehran and back every week or so. And you knew you were going to be out so many days and you were going to stop here and here and here and here. And we came back into Germany and they said, you guys are going on minimum crew rest for a special mission. So we didn't know what we were doing, but we went and slept a while and came back and they said, you're going to Ethiopia. So what are we going to do there? And they said, well, they've had a change of government and they are throwing out all the Americans. They gave the Americans 48 hours to get all of their stuff out. So we went there, and it was pretty strange. We landed, and they had automatic weapons on top of the airport, and as we taxied down, you could see these guns just following us, you know. And they parked us, and right next to us was a red Chinese cargo bird, and they were offloading like 200 or 300 GIs, military, you know, and we were unloading embassy personnel. Some of them were in their pajamas. They had just went and told them, go to the airport now, and there's an airplane going to come in and take you out of here. And there was little kids and all kinds of stuff, you know. That was one of the strangest ones, and we took them back to Greece. We flew those people back to Greece. Yeah. But it was always kind of exciting.
Yeah.
And then we trained all the time in the military. We trained and trained and trained. And you trained like you were almost the real thing. Every day you trained, you know. And we had accidents and we lost friends and that sort of thing, you know. We sure did. And I'm glad I did it, but it wasn't something I want to do every day. But I took one of my buddies home. He died in an accident. He was from New York City, and he died in Greenland. They had just messed up a landing somehow or another, and I think 18 people or something got killed, and he was on it. We lived across the hall from each other in the barracks. But interesting, that's about it for me. My life is pretty sedentary now. I live here in Fayetteville. I enjoy it.
What brought you to Fayetteville?
Well, I was living in Madison outside of Huntsville, and I was a station manager for Atlas Air at the airport. And I retired in 15, and right then they announced that Toyota Mazda auto plant was coming in to Madison area. Well, it came in across the street from my house, across the road. I lived out in the country, but they had come out there. They bought 3,000 acres of land, and it's there now. And they said, we're bringing in 4,000 people. So my wife and I said, we need to go, because we had lived there for 18 years. Excuse me. And but anyway, we started looking around. And I love South Alabama. I still own property there, but it's too humid and too hot for me anymore. And I wanted to stay here because I lived here for so long, this area, North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. And we had a friend that lives out here at Riverbend. And he said, well, why don't you come up there and look around for some property? So we did, and we took Eldad Road out and went by the water station and down the hill across the river. And as soon as we crossed the river, I told my wife, I said, if we can afford it, this is where we're going. And so we bought some land there and built a house. Moved up here, and we moved in here in 2017. And I had already retired, and my wife, she was a nurse at Huntsville Hospital. She retired about a year later. And we're pretty comfortable here. Yeah. enjoy it here a lot.
Well, we can't thank you enough for this interview.
Thank y'all.
It's
I didn't know
definitely
anything about this,
interesting.
but you've got this is a compliment to Fayetteville. I've never seen this in any small town. There's a museum at my home in South Alabama, but it has nothing like this. I never saw this before.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.